If you go on the website, you look at the 3 major professional sites for multiple sclerosis professionals, you see nothing on there about diet. They don't talk about that. This is where they want to do drugs. And so here's my definition of nutrition. I know I skipped through a whole bunch of stuff here, and a lot of it may not be terribly convincing. There's a lot of stuff, more stuff that we can talk about. But here's my definition, as opposed to the current definition. The current definition is vitamin C does this, and vitamin D does that, and vitamin D, and fiber does this, and protein does. I mean, we always think in these really narrow sort of slits, you know, a little bit of bits and pieces of information, and we get so confused. We think about how much is there, how much is in the food. Who cares? You look at these labels. We have RDAs, all that kind of stuff. Think about this. Nutrition involves the integrated effects of countless food constituents. Who knows how many chemicals in food? 100,000 maybe? Million? Our bodies is a marvelous machine. We consume this stuff. It comes in, our body decides on how much it wants of each of these things and brings it into the pool of reactions. If I could tell you what goes on inside of the cell, and creates this marvelous sort of workings to create health if you're given the right food, to create illness if you don't. And it's just quite clear. It involves infinitely complex mechanisms to produce comprehensive health. And, can't see that, it's my favorite one. I'll read it. The nutritional effect is greater than the sum of its parts. It's like a symphony. When you go listen to a symphony, you don't go there, one person working on one instrument, banging away on one note. That's not a symphony. But that's the way we study nutrition. We might add another note or so, but we're not looking at the symphony. We're simply not looking at the symphony. The symphony is marvelous when you start thinking about the integration of all this stuff. That's when you learn why it is that Esselstyn had such great results, and why it is that some other physicians now in recent years are also showing that you can take diet and do marvelous things with it. Not through supplements, but through food. I'm talking about whole food, whole grains, whole vegetables, whole fruits. I'm not talking about plant parts like sugar and white flour and stuff like that. I'm talking about whole foods. You know, working together, sort of a very natural kind of thing. And don't add back a lot of salt, sugar, fat, and dairy, by the way. So why is this information so invisible? This is it. I want to just share a couple of ideas with you because I've been involved in national policy, as I said. And this is what I find really troubling. I get excited about the information we're working on. I know it's there, and some of my colleagues know it's there too. But to even come and talk about this for a lot of people in the current setting is dangerous. They could lose the opportunity of getting more funding to do the research. They could lose their reputation. They could be kicked out of school, you know, in academic studies. I'm serious about that. You know, somebody could really stand up and sort of say anything. I'm just recently retired, so I'd say. So why is this information more, you know, invisible? Here I want to tell you first. There's two bodies, two committees in this country that set national food policy. One's called the Food and Nutrition Board, FNB, of the Institute of Medicine. What they do, they tell us every 5 years since 1943 how much nutrients we should consume. They set the RDAs, recommended dietary allowances. They give us specific numbers. Then they create, what they're doing is they've taken all the scientific information in the last 5 years, put it all together, making a big report, hand it off to the second committee, the Dietary Guidelines Committee. And the Dietary Guidelines Committee, what they do is they turn and make little pictures for us. Like the food pyramid. Maybe they make a square. Used to. So here's the first committee filtering all the scientific information, seeing what it says. Give it a second committee. The second committee, incidentally, is run by the USDA, Department of Agriculture. They're setting policy on human health. I think they're more interested in the health of livestock than they are in us. But they're setting those policies. And then we all sort of wait, what's the next pyramid going to say? I mean, anyhow, go to the first committee, the latest report, 2002. This is what it said, first page of about a 900-page report. It says, the report recommends that to meet the body's daily nutritional needs while minimizing risk for chronic disease like heart disease and cancer, adults should consume 10 to 35% from protein. I thought that was a typo. Because, you know, the recommendation for protein over the years, the so-called RDA, was a single number, 10% is enough. Now they're saying we can minimize risk of chronic disease and go all the way up to 35% protein. Dr. Atkins had a field day. So to put that in a little perspective, here's what that means. Here's the level that it's always been recommended as enough. But of course, none of us believe that's enough. More is better. So what we do, we consume somewhere between 11 and 22% in this region here. And this is the region here where these diseases emerge. When we go from there to there, that's when cholesterol levels go up. That's when calcium gets spilled out into the urine. That's when cancers start to grow. You know, as we go from here to, not just because of the protein, by the way. It's because we're consuming foods because of our great reverence for protein, like animal protein. So it's a result of all kinds of things besides just the protein. But in any case, this is what we do. There's your average intake. Now this august body tells us we can go to there, sanctioned by the Food Pyramid group, and we can minimize disease risk. That is ludicrous. That is absolutely nuts. No, I don't know hardly anyone. I mean, there's some people today, I guess, get up there, but almost nobody even gets there. They tell us to even get higher. So let me just explore this question a little bit further. I'll come back to the punchline in a minute. Part of the same sentence, I broke it down. Here it is on added sugars. It says the report recommends that added sugars, and here's what they mean by added sugars: candy, soft drinks, fruit drinks, pastries, and other sweets, should comprise no more than 25% of total calories. Sounds like, you know, they're looking out for our interests. You know, we shouldn't consume more than 25% of our calories as added sugars. Right? Well, it turns out that what it also says, we can consume up to 25% and minimize disease risk. That's what the implication is. At that time, the United Nations was organizing through the WHO a committee looking after the same sort of thing. And it was chaired by a friend of mine, and so I've seen the correspondence on this, not because of him, but and I know the story from other sources. It turns out that when the United States body was deciding this, and more or less completing, the word leaked out that they were going to set an upper cap of 25%. The United Nations Committee had decided just about that time, they were running a little bit behind, they were going to set a cap of 10%. They said 10% is all we can have. The sugar industry heard word of that, sent a letter to the United Nations Committee, and said the U.S. Commission just decided we could go up to 25%, added sugar was no harm and it's safe and all that. You better get it up to 25%, not 10%. If you don't, we have friends in Congress and the Department of Health. And if you don't, we're going to go to our congressional representatives to get the United States to withhold funding from that report. I mean, that's the kind of hardball we're talking about here. The industry steps in, brings that kind of pressure, tried to do it in the United Nations Committee. Fortunately, it was chaired by a fellow who ran a Welshman running a research institute for many years in Scotland. And Scots are pretty tough. And they didn't shake, they didn't tremble even. They stood their ground and it's set at 10%. But the U.S. thing now is sanctioned at 25%. And so my son and I were doing a book. It was actually my son's idea in the beginning, so he went and did the calculations. We said, well, you know, now we got the word from on high of what the best diet should look like in terms of nutrient intakes. So we put together a diet that would meet these new guidelines. And here it is. It's got 18% protein, 31% fat to it. See, this is, I wish I could move it up. Breakfast, lunch, you can't see the dinner. The dinner, you can have 3 slices of pepperoni pizza, 1 16-ounce of soda, and 1 serving of Archway sugar cookies. Now that's what the government is telling us we can have in order to minimize disease risk. And you wonder why you're confused? Or people wonder why they're confused? We're going to go no place. We're going to go no place, you know, with this kind of information. It's just impossible. And so then we ask ourselves, you go and you look further in the report and see who funded it. I sit on these committees, and as far as I'm aware, all the money that was made available to